So, hi everyone, welcome back to our weekly NAfME clinics. Thank you all so much for coming. So we have our check-in link on the board and also in the Discord. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our three composers.
Alright, everyone. Alright, let's actually, I'll stay here to like do this right here. Alright, everyone, my name is JR Zaha. I'm a MediaCom major. I'm a senior, and yeah, I'm pretty much
Hello, I'm Nicolas. I am a senior, graduating spring 2025. I've been playing music for 11 years, composing for about 6 or 5. Yeah.
I'm Zackary Hernandez. I'm also MediaCom graduating this spring. And I have been playing on and off since like elementary school, sticking with trombone since like high school, and I've been composing since 2019, 2018, I think. So is that 6 years, something like that?
I should probably say my other stuff. So I've been playing music since I was 5, piano. And for composing, I've been composing since around the same time as that, 2019, 2020. Alright.
So, what should I know to help my student? First of all, be an eager ear to your students, Being a composer, or deciding to be a composer, I think is a big leap of faith. It's a scary world. I didn't have anyone to kind of listen to me or help me out, so if you have a student that is interested in composing, just be a lending ear to him or them and help them. You can offer comments on what you know, so if you're a sax player or a flute player and they're trying to write like a flute piece, just give them some tips, and that'll help them. Encourage them to write for the instruments that they play, or encourage them to write for their friends. The more opportunities they get to have their pieces played by live players, the better. Especially heading to college, you need a portfolio, 3 pieces, and and then try to make arrangements yourself for your students are fun. So if you have no experience with arranging, composing, it's fine. We'll get into that a bit later. But just delving your toes in there can really help you guide your students. You could take advantage of some of the composition classes we have over here at CSUN. So we have Music 321, which is beginning composition, and Music 322, beginning composition for media. Beginning comp is more atonal, avant-garde stuff, and then beginning media comp is geared more towards helping you score towards film. And yeah, watch YouTube videos, listen to resources, major source of information for all of us, I would say, starting out. YouTube is your best friend starting out, so watching some videos of composing can go a long way.
Alright. Now, let's move on to some general composition tips. So, first off, start with arranging a song for your instrument. Since you already know your instrument, you know the ins and outs of it, it'll definitely be easier for you to translate what you have in your mind to your instrument, to the paper, like that. And next up, use models. Steal, because good artists borrow, but great artists steal. If you have a genre that you like, what aspects of that genre do you like? Do you like EDM? Do you like sidechain compression? Do you like, saxophones and jazz? Take the stuff that you like and incorporate it into your own music, essentially. And of course, you can go to IMSLP for classical music scores before the 1900s, or you can look up a lot of scores online because there's a lot of scores from John Williams, a lot of orchestral scores online, so take a look at that as well.
You just magically appear on your computer.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
It's great, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And next up, do it. You won't improve unless you try, because starting small is better than doing nothing at all. Very cliche, but yes, it is true. And also set the intention to finish something rather than making it sound good. Because a lot of times, at least for me, they have the perfectionist mindset. It has to be perfect, it has to be perfect, this melody has to be perfect, I have to do X, Y, Z, this specific way has to live up to my expectations. Get rid of all of that if you can, and just focus on, okay, today I'm gonna write 4 bars. Today I'm gonna write the melody. Today I'm gonna write 8 bars. Today, I'll get 1 measure. If 1 measure is good enough for you, that's good enough. Any progress is better than nothing, essentially. And then, it can't be scary, but let your musical friends listen to your music. Chances are, they will not judge you, and if they do, they'll probably do it in a joking manner, okay? Essentially. Odds are they'll catch something that you missed, like engraving and range mistakes, and they'll have an idea of how to make your music better. Because when you're composing, right, you have all these ideas in your head, you're thinking of 5 things at once. What's the melody gonna do? What's the harmony like? How am I gonna engrave all this? So you can probably overcomplicate a lot of things in your head. So that's where your friend is like, okay, just make this a descending scale rather than like that. Trust your ear. If you're a musician, you can go compose because chances are you've listened to a lot of music, you know what good music sounds like. So just dig into that when you compose, essentially. If you get discouraged with your progress, composing is just something that improves with time and practice, just like anything. Which ties into the previous statement, just do it, essentially. Even if you don't know what you're doing, getting something on paper is better than doing nothing at all. And then if you don't know, you can use forms like AB and ABA, because those forms right there can really help to laser your focus in on what to do, instead of just being all over the place. And composing theme and variations can help if you have trouble writing melodies and stuff like that. And writer's block, we'll get to that later. Be cautious of under or overwriting, because a lot of times you might have a certain melody that you like, and we just like repeat it over and over and over again. Or sometimes you overwrite, you have a new idea every like 4 bars, every section. So here's some quick fixes for that. So for underwriting, just find elements from your idea or your melody and repeat it with slight differences, theme variations, taking your main melody, taking the second part of it, changing it up a little bit, something like that. And for overriding, you can simplify and repetition legitimizes. So the more you do it, of course not too much, the more it'll be legitimate in the ears of the listener. It's all about striking that balance, essentially. And then naming pieces is hard. Don't worry if you can't really find a name for your piece. It'll come to you eventually. And then for the last slide for the general composition tips, there are 3 main elements to a composition. There's foreground, like a melody, for example. There's a middle ground, like the rhythmic ostinatos, or a counter melody. And then there's a background, like pads or sustained chords. Try to keep 3 different ideas max going on at the same time, because if you have 4 to 5 to 6 different things going on at once, it'll overload the listener 9 times out of 10, unless that's what you're going for.
Okay, so perfect. The next thing we're going to talk about is kind of like a composition exercise that you can use either with your students or for yourself. Because as a performer, we all play like etudes. We're like, oh, I want to work on my range or my intervals or whatever. And you can kind of take that same kind of approach for composition because it's kind of restricting your focus rather than just writing your magnum opus in your symphony or whatever. It's a lot more directed. And it's really just practicing. Can you go to the next slide here? I've got linked to a Reddit post that's really in-depth about this because it's a good resource for composition, the composer subreddit. It's actually a lot of beginners asking like, oh, how does my piece sound? And it's, there's a very broad range of people on there in terms of abilities. Like there's music professionals, like professors, film composers, and then people who write stuff that's more out there. And then just beginners who are in high school writing band stuff. But so it's all these different exercises, like write a piece with only seconds or chordal harmony. It's basically just all these different kinds of restrictions. Because at least for me, I've found when I get into a specific sound world that I like, so if I want to use the whole tone scale as the basis, or I want to use this one certain harmonic progression with slight variations, that really will help your student, I think, hone in on what they're trying to do, like JR said, and kind of channel it. And then that also gives them an opportunity to have contrasting sections. So like, okay, the A section is going to use, like this one, use one mode, and the B section will use another, or restrictions with certain kind of harmonies. I think if you go to the next slide, there's some more.
Just one thing before going to the next slide right there. Another thing is, for the restrictions, ask your student, or if you're composing, ask yourself, what vibe or what feeling am I going for? Is this more of like an action type vibe? Is this more of a sentimental, dreamy vibe? That can help direct your creative juices essentially to go ahead and be like, okay, we use strings here. Okay, we're gonna use brass and percussion here, something like that.
I think this should be the rest of the examples that this poster wrote. So I find that they're pretty helpful because again, it's like instead of practicing like your legato tonguing, it's like using this certain kind of compositional device, I guess you could call it. One good thing also that I think he might mention, is doing like 3 voices or just piano. Because especially, at least one of my issues when I started out was like, oh, I'm gonna write a full orchestral piece, never having composed anything before. And I guess an analogy would be throwing a baseball and thinking you're gonna be an MLB pitcher. Within your first 10 minutes, it's just that doesn't happen. Because everybody's got to start from somewhere unless you're prodigy. And I don't think any of the three of us were like, oh, the first thing I wrote, perfect, gonna sell it. So yeah, you guys, again, gotta start.
My players hated me for my first composition.
Next slide. Okay. Yeah, again, like what JR had said, try to finish it. Finishing it is always a better goal than making it perfect. Because I've heard the adage that perfection is the opposite of completion. Because if you keep working at it, it's going to kill your interest too if you're working on the same piece for 9 months, 10 months. It's not always the best way to go about it.
And also, if you can get something done, like finishing it, that's making your draft, and then you can add on to it later on, or like get rid of some stuff later on to make it better.
Okay, so let's take a look on the practice giving feedback and like, oh, what can my student do to improve this composition? So for context, it's a sophomore's composition who had only been writing for about a year. So again, this would be kind of something typical that you'd see from like a high school student who's like, hey, I'm your first trumpet player, and I wrote this little thing for piano, what do you think? So if you want to click on the link, it should open a MuseScore file. You can go full screen, or that works, yeah. So if you want to just hit the play button so you can listen, we don't have to listen to the whole thing, maybe just like first 2 systems, so just hit the play button.
Audio is actually on extra.
Yeah, that might be good.
Extra. Alright.
Okay. One of 2 plays on MuseScore for the day. So JR, if you want to just scroll up to the beginning. So first impressions, what's something, there's obviously things that I've noticed because I've looked at this and thought of what I would want to say. Just raise your hand if you have a comment on what you think is good, or what can be, I guess, what you like about it, and then something that could be improved, or vice one or the other.
Or just anything.
Anything, just impressions. Because again, like your students like, hey, Mr. or Miss, whatever, band director, I wrote this. What do you think about it?
Thoughts.
Yeah. Go ahead, right up front.
I think it has a very clear mood.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were trying to go for a certain feeling or something that they wanted to evoke with it, that definitely was achieved. Although I do feel like it is kind of, it doesn't have to have form. It feels like it lacks form.
Good. Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, good eye. Yeah, because it kind of just meanders and it doesn't stop either. It's kind of like a not even a top, just like a ball rolling downhill. It just keeps going. It doesn't really seem like it's going anywhere in particular. It's like, oh, there's this, and then that, and then this, and that. So, good. Yeah, both of those good things. I saw, Tori, you had your hand up as well, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar, like there wasn't a lot of repetition.
Yeah, it was like pretty much every bar. There were certain elements that were continuing, but for the most part, it was a new thing every bar, if not even more frequently than that. Which is, again, BN composers, they tend to skew towards the extremes. Either it's like this and every bar has something new, because they're like, oh, there's all these different things I can do. Or they repeat the same thing for ad nauseum. And then,
I remember finding some charts like that.
Yeah, neither of them are very pleasant to listen to, because this one, especially if you're listening as an audience, say this was at a concert, you're like, the human ear likes things that repeat, but not enough so much that you get bored, is the issue.
Right.
You really, like JR said, gotta ride the line between overdoing it.
And also to add on to that, I feel like a lot of times beginning composers, they go to the different extremes because they have this expectation of, oh, I have to write something here, or I write too much, I underwrite. Like earlier, underwriting or overwriting. So just being aware of those expectations and your students can relate, essentially.
And, go for it, Nicolas.
Yeah, I was about to say, the human ear likes to pick up on things you've already recognized. So even if you don't bring back the theme exactly how it was at the beginning, if you kind of switch it around and kind of play with it a little, one musical theme you could turn into 5 different ideas that are similar.
Like, I think building off that just kind of as an exercise, because when I was looking at this, I was like, oh, the da, 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 JR, can you like that? No, just on the piano, zero, that piano.
What the heck, dude?
Just the top, just the G, B flat, A, G, F, G,
Okay.
yeah. Like even just that, what you can potentially do is play these notes. Like if your student was like, oh, okay, well I got too much, then what can I do with that idea? It's literally like as simple as just transposing it down,
Or like,
or yeah, even some
Retrograde,
backwards.
inversion, yeah.
something like that.
Or even
I mean, you can reverse it too if you have more, because like there's not much motion in the first measure, there's a lot in the second, so you can be like reverse it like that.
Even small things like changing the register, the octave. Changing timbre can be a really nice change.
any other comments, improvement wise? Or something you liked, either,
Just anything.
yeah.
I guess you kind of said this, but like, there's not really a melody, or it's very hard to latch onto anything. Yeah.
Well, there's no rest.
Yeah, that's also another thing, it just does not stop.
It's like a train.
Good. Anything else? Because you gotta practice. Students like, oh, how does it sound? I'm scared. Jordan.
I would start out by saying good job using both like the arpeggios and the chords and stuff, but then I would go and talk about how instead of just using like preposition triads for all those arpeggios, they could like invert some stuff so it's not moving and all over the place.
Right. Yeah, because again, repetition is good, but doing the same, like, because your ear starts to expect, like, oh, as when you reposition. But then if you just mix it up even a couple times, it makes a big difference. Good. Yeah, again, being nice to them and saying, good job, even just, like, again, encouragement. I mean, you guys are all teachers, you know that. Encouragement is really important. Wyland?
I was gonna say, like, kind of similarly, I mean, I would suggest, like, if there's another student that, like, plays piano, like, ask them to look over to make sure all the, like, chord, like, jumps, like that one in, like, the third line on the screen right now,
Oh,
with,
this one
like,
right
in, like, the middle with, like, the left hand, like,
Oh,
doing
okay.
just, like, chords there, and then, like, the one right above it, the right hand going from, like, I think that's a G below the staff to the
Ooh,
B
yeah.
flat on the staff, like,
You
if
can't
that's feasible.
really play that, yeah.
And also there's hand crossings too, like here is the right hand, the left hand is like on the right here as well, so like, it's like, or like that.
Is that a treble clef AVA?
That was also something I was going to point out.
Oh my
Janice don't like
gosh.
that. Really do not like that. You only use that for tenor singers, I think. I can't think of any
Yeah.
other context that you'd use that.
So there's like up here, like
Yeah, don't use
just write AVA with the line on top.
or even the ledger lines, but that's more of like a registered thing. If it's like super, like if it's that high, probably, I don't know, JR, you're the pianist.
Pianists are fine with ledger lines, just as long as they're not up here, like a super high piccolo register, then they're fine with it.
Any other I thought I saw another hand. Sure. Dory, do you have something else?
I was gonna say the left hand is a little repetitive, which is fine, but then especially near the end, it was like the same chord in the left hand, like da 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 da, like non-stop left hand block chords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like Jordan said, oh, maybe you could put in an inversion or change the chord Or you could change one or the other. Like, oh, if you really like the rhythm, that would change the harmony or vice versa. Yeah, Felix.
I mean, I'd recommend formatting stuff. There's a few parts where it's like hard to, like, what is it, the last stave there in the left hand, the third bar, 2 quarter notes followed by 2 8 notes in 6/8 time is really confusing to read.
Readability.
Yeah, it splits the bar, you know.
Right. Yeah, there's another, if you go up, JR, this is more of a, or the dotted 8/16. If someone gave that to me to play, like in the concert band or whatever, I kind of just let like, I just scribble it out and pencil it in at that point. Or if you
really angry face on it.
angry face, yeah. If you scroll up,
Or
JR.
the bar after.
Like right here too.
Oh, the bar after. That's a
Bar
little bit
26
simpler, but
Bum, bum, bum.
You said second? Like,
yeah, go up a little bit more. A little bit more. I saw it earlier. Yeah, the 2 note heads on the same one. That was really confusing.
yeah, that's redundant because only the right hand can be playing that right there.
You can't play one note.
I mean,
you know,
technically you can. I mean, like you can play this right here, but how practical is that?
Okay, anything else before I move on? All right. Good job. So you guys now have practice, and like going into this, you're like, oh, I'm not a composer. I teach trumpet and whatever, and I'm a band director, right? So you can do it again. You're musicians. You're gonna have a lot more experience than you realize. It's not a foreign alien concept.
As I said earlier, you know what good music sounds like. So just trust yourself and give these critiques.
Should we go back to the PowerPoint here?
No.
Okay, we talked about that. I don't think we need that. You go ahead. That was just all my comments, I think. So yeah, move on.
Which one of you guys wrote that one?
Me. That was mine. Yeah, that was from 2019. My stuff does not sound that bad. Nick, did you want to start talking about this so we can
Yeah. So over here we got plenty of resources listed. I'm sure the PowerPoint will be sent to you, so you'll have access to these resources. We have first YouTube. YouTube is pretty much my teacher. At the beginning, I had YouTube, and it taught me pretty much all I knew up going to college. We have different types of YouTubers, so we have David Bruce, composition, music theory, music history, music business, blogs, classical composition. We have Adam Neely, videos about jazz theory. We got Orchestration Online, 8-bit music theory, does analysis on video games. And Guy Michael Moore, scoring, composition, orchestration, real world experience. So watching these guys, like interviews or their process in composing can really help you.
Yeah, I would say in terms of beginners, like what resources specifically they should look at, I would say Ryan Leash has the best stuff for beginners because he'll break down how do I write a good melody. This is how you structure like a call and response. This is how you write strings like John Williams. It breaks it down into very specific and focused pieces. And he's got advanced stuff too, sure. So him, 8-bit music theory, his stuff is video game based, so it's usually more, I found that video games and film tend to be more approachable for younger students. But he does get pretty complicated pretty quickly.
There's a lot of note stuff too, like why is Phrygian sounding literally 10, something like that.
Yeah, so if your student has more of a grounding in music theory, or they come from a piano background, they might have a better time.
Yeah. We also got ISPI right here, free website that has examples of ranges and features of different instruments.
Ooh, can you show that, JR?
Yeah,
actually, because this one is
very helpful.
I think even as a teacher, it'll still be pretty helpful.
Yeah, if you ever forget the range of any instrument or
Like let's say you want to go to alto flute, right?
Big fan of alto flute.
yeah, it'll show you the range of the instrument, and if you click on the actual the notes, it'll show you a video of them playing it.
Worst transposition. You guys picked a good example. Awful transposition. It's in G.
And it'll show you concert pitch and written pitch. Show you different dynamics too.
It also gives you descriptions right underneath the video.
Oh, the descriptions are really helpful.
Also gives insight on extended techniques, different techniques, each group of instruments plays.
Like we got like the strings on.
Go to the cello one, because that one's got the ones for the whole string family.
Sure, natural harmonics, artificial harmonics, bow colors, pizzicato, left hand inflections,
You wanna
right
click on
inflections. Sure, let's go to artificial harmonics.
This would be something that's very advanced, but you never know. I mean, if your student has
Yeah.
one that has taken lessons before or something like this,
Yeah, this will be just helpful for both the teacher and the student. Like if a string player comes up to you and is like, "Oh, I wrote this piece with a bunch of artificial harmonics," and you don't remember from class what that looks like, boom, right there.
And also, if you're interested in composing, the more you know about the different instruments, the more resources you have at your disposal.
Yeah, it beats carrying around a big orchestration book. It's just in your computer right here.
yeah,
For free too, for free.
For free.
don't pay for. We reference a book later, the Samuel Adler Guide to Orchestration. Sorry, I'm hopping on that. I just don't
Stoffel-
know
Stoffel-
that.
That's right here.
Huh?
Stoffel's a big fan of that.
Do not buy that book.
It's like
Do
$100.
not. It's not worth it.
Very expensive.
It's like, yeah, and you can, if you ask me for it, I will send it to you and it'll just magically appear on your computer. Or you can just Google Samuel Adler Guide to, Guide to Orchestration?
Yeah,
Study of Orchestration.
Orchestration, yeah.
PDF, 3rd edition, and it'll pop up with like 8 different.
There's also different like types of like pocket books of orchestration. So if you don't have access to a laptop, there's like little books of orchestration that will show you the ranges. And
They're generally like pretty good. I think I know how Leonard has a whole.
like $10 for those little orchestration books. Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah. This slideshow.
That one,
It's
right?
more resources, yeah. So MuseScore, free notation software, that'll allow you to make sheet music, Dorico, Sibelius for trials, also notation softwares. We just talked about this, the Samuel Adler Study of Orchestration, r/composer, which is I think you read it.
Yeah, so
Yeah, read
yeah.
it. And then also your professors over here. So if you have Dr. McCaffrey or Dr. Howard, I'm sure they can answer any composition questions for you.
Or Dr. Simpson.
Or Dr. Simpson.
Yeah. Alright.
This is my thing that I added. There's a website called composersite.com. Every 6 months it usually goes down for like a week until the person who owns the domain remembers to pay for it. But it's got a bunch of little links to all these different competitions or calls for scores or artist residencies. You can also filter it by what's free. Because I've heard different things on like, oh, should I pay for a call for scores? Which is basically, if you haven't heard of it, where a performing group or a publisher will say, hey, we're taking scores for oboe quartet, and we're having our resident oboe quartet perform the top 10 winners from the contest. So then composers, sometimes limited by like geographic area or like background or something like that, or open to anybody, can submit it. And then usually there's like some kind of prize, like a cash prize, or in that case, performance. And then there's a whole school of thought, like, should I pay for it? Most of the time, no. If it's a really good opportunity or it's one that your student really likes, that's good to do. Or you could really just do it for practice. Like, oh, I've never written for an oboe quartet before. I'm gonna write it and have my band director take a look at it and see what they think about it.
And also, Ryan Leach, who we mentioned earlier, does do composer competitions. He used to do it monthly. I don't know about what's happening now.
It's probably yearly or something like that, I think. It's
Yeah.
probably, yeah, scaled back. Those are a lot of work.
Right, because they're like full ensemble stuff a lot of times. It's like, we have a picture. Now, write something that's based off of that picture. You know what I mean? So stuff like that.
So I also believe 8-bit music theory, we talked about earlier, in the Discord server has weekly challenges for you to either arrangements or compositions, and those are really neat to do.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
One thing I really like, because I did that for a while when I was kind of, like after I'd been composing for about a year or two, and I kind of had like a basic feel for it. It's nice because it's every week and it's a prompt that you don't pick, because that's also something that's hard for me. It's like, oh, if I can do whatever I want, I don't pick anything. I need to kind of boot to kind of get me kind of writing and thinking of something I want to do. So that helps, but also it's a pretty big community of people, so it's pretty much a guaranteed way to get feedback. I mean, unless your submission gets lost in kind of just the wave of people. But they usually take an hour every Thursday at like 9 p.m. or whatever and listen through everything. And people will be like, oh, they're really good about getting comments. So even if you don't win for the week, I've actually learned quite a bit doing that, and it's a really friendly environment. They'll be like, hey, like for that they would have said, don't use the 8 above the treble clef. It looks awesome for pianists. So that's really good, and it's people from a broad range of experiences. So I really like that. Good call. I forgot about that.
Alright, anything else for the last slide? Alright,
Questions?
It's got to be one question.
the floor is all yours.
We're going to stay until someone asks a question. Stop by side.
For an ensemble size like studio ensemble last semester, how long would it take you to write something for it where you would consider it like score ready to actually bring it out and play? Like how many days, weeks?
It depends honestly on your skill level.
But
Yeah.
also the depth of the project.
So
Exactly.
you get about 3 weeks to do it, and I would say for me it takes me about a week to get everything fully prepared. That comes with knowledge of your notation software. Like if I was using Sibelius, it would take me 4 weeks probably to get it done, but since I'm very used to Finale,
Rest in peace, Finale.
rest in peace, I could pump out those scores and parts really, really fast.
At least for me, I'm proficient enough at my notation software to do a tag competition in 2 days. Don't do that, by the way.
Yeah, that sucks.
You're literally just getting no sleep and not eating almost anything to get it done on time. But that's the thing. That's where if you know your limits, that's good. But I say for like a pretty decent like difficulty composition, like an arrangement if you're doing, I say like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks is a good benchmark. Gives you enough time to print out all your parts, format all the parts, engrave the score, be like, yo, Zach, yo, Nick, please check my score. Don't play me too hard.
Peer review is a big.
Peer review is huge. I was thinking that same thing, yeah. Have other people look at it. I just say the complexity of the cue for me, because like the big one, the Star Wars one I did, that one, because then also for studio you have to take it down, usually do a transcription or a fine sheet using like a piano reduction. So like something like Star Wars, that took me probably the better part of a week. But if it's like a pop song, but it's just like rhythm section and vocals, that I can do that. Like, I think any of us can do that.
You did 4 chords, the entire chorus.
Felix?
Yo, job opportunity for you guys.
Oh yeah?
What's up?
Dr. Stoffel wants to pay someone to make a score for him from parts.
Oh,
Okay,
Just
okay.
email him.
yeah, sounds good.
Alright, guys, thank you.
Yes.
So if you have a student who like has the goal, like they're in high school, they're like, I want to write something for like the school's concert band or orchestra or other like large ensemble, like at what point would you like how long, I know it probably like depends on like the student, but like how long would you recommend they work on composing before you feel like they're like ready to like try that?
I've got an idea if you guys have anything.
You can go first.
Yeah, because that's what I started was like one of the first things I wrote was like a full orchestral piece. That's really bold to do that. So is good to kind of say the weight. I don't know, because that piece I wrote was probably after about a year of writing. Because then it ties into what their orchestration knowledge is, or like arranging basically. Because then you have to know what all the instruments do. Because a lot of composers kind of just jump into orchestration and don't know. Don't know like, oh, I didn't know that. I thought the bass clarinet read bass clef. Or something like that. Like, no, I'm serious. It happens a lot, or not realizing that trumpet and B flat needs to transpose, or things like that. Because then,
Wait, soprano has the C instrument? No, it's not.
yeah. So, probably at least a couple years. But an alternative, because like what JR said, is what they know. Like if they're like a trumpet player, like write a song for your section to play at like a pep rally or something, or if they're a woodwind player, they're like one of those crap kids in high school who can play like saxophone, clarinet, trumpet, and like flute. Then if they already have a background in playing a lot of multiple instruments, then like, oh, they play all the woodwinds and they have friends who play woodwinds, then do a woodwind quintet or something. Start small is the biggest thing.
What point do you tell a kid you need lessons? Like, I remember when I was in high school, I had a friend who was a composer and he wrote a couple things, and then at one point my our music teacher was like, you need to get like serious composition lessons because you want to get better.
Yeah, I can answer that because I've done some composition lessons before I switched over to media comp. So I was an ed major for the first 2 years over here. I switched over to media comp, and during those 2 years, I got composition lessons with someone else. I think it's at the point where like high school teachers, like you can't help them anymore because you don't know like specific like little engraving details or how to use a notation software or DAW. There's a lot of like technology in composition with the programs you use. So I guess if you get to a point where you're unable to give more knowledge than what you've already given to that student, you direct them to lessons.
Or if you jump on that on YouTube, like if they're kind of in a stage where like you kind of still can grasp it and kind of help them, point them in the right direction, but for whatever reason, because also it gets kind of expensive sometimes, hiring private lessons regardless. YouTube and all these things usually are a really good resource for that. And also one of the YouTube pages we mentioned, Orchestration Online, that's on there. He does a yearly orchestration contest, which is different from like a call for scores, because the most recent one was like 8 bars of a Beethoven piano sonata, and you had to orchestrate it for chamber orchestra. And he's a professional orchestrator, and he'll look at it and give you comments like, oh, in your parts, I don't know if he looks at the parts, he might just look at the score. He's like, oh, in your score, the bass cornet plays bass clef. Like, you shouldn't do that. Or, oh, your flute is written in Ledger lines below the staff. You're not going to hear it. It could even play that. And then if you pay for like the premium subscription to his Patreon or whatever, then you can get more comments. So pointing them into YouTube, if they're like, oh yeah, I'm able to write for a concert band with reasonable ability, or like when it surpasses how much you can teach them personally, YouTube is a good intermediary before they go into lessons to build their confidence and get more.
Yeah, I want to add one thing to your question. You asked how to kind of deal with kids who want to write a piece for the concert band. I would say it's definitely doable, but you probably might want to steer them towards writing a piece that's original, that's played by like the beginning band, like something really simple, like melody in C major, like the C major scale, like it's something really simple. It's easier for them to compose like a full completed piece with that, and they could probably do it fast. So you could focus with them on like how to hand out parts and how to make a correct score. Also, I would say encourage them to do arrangements. Arrangements is another good way to get into composing. It helps you get experience in your notation software. Yeah.
You don't have to think about what the composition is. You're like, how do I make this playable and how does it sound cool? Yeah. That's my favorite.
Also to add on, with the concert band thing, is your student familiar with concert band repertoire? Do they know what it sounds like? Do they know like the typical tropes of it and what each section typically does in a concert band? And as well, I would recommend if they're starting out, just give them like smaller sections, like make them like arrange or compose something or orchestrate something for like smaller sections within the concert band, and then slowly go up like that to the point where they're comfortable doing it, like a mock-up, and then so they can bring it into the actual one and be like, okay, I know what I'm doing, something like that.
Good one, yeah.
So let's just say, I had an experience like this in high school. A euphonium player, he just showed up one day with an arrangement of Fly Me to the Moon for concert band. And he was like, hey, can we celebrate this? And my mentor was like, all right. And we read it, and it was not that great. And then he tweaked it a little, and he was like, we read it again a couple weeks later, and he was like, can we play this at the concert? And in my opinion, the answer should have been no. But, it was like the Pops concert or whatever. He was like, all right, sure, we'll do it. And we did it. I don't know that was necessarily the right move for him at that stage in his development. How would you tell a kid no? Because you were probably a kid who got told no.
Maybe I would suggest pushing it back a semester if they're still going to be there. Because you could say, oh, you already have the repertoire for the concert already set. So you could let them down easy by just at least giving them hope that they could have it next semester, and then you could look at it again and maybe try to improve it more.
Because as a composer, I'm radically better, at least I think, than I did 6 months ago. Like my workflow is better. And that's with a learning curve that's slowed down because I'd like to think I'm not a complete beginner. Because especially as a beginner, with like 3 months or 6 months, especially if they're watching YouTube and doing their homework and practicing, so to speak, it's going to change. I mean, you are kind of just kicking it down the road and letting them down easy, but just 3 to 6 months, like over what summer break, it'd probably be a lot better.
And then also to tell them to send their composition or like arrangement to the director over the break after they've worked on it. So then they're gonna be like, okay, do this, don't do this. Your trumpet player can't play that high, etc. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Or you could give them an alternative opportunity, like, oh, maybe this isn't the right fit right now, but maybe before the concert, you and a couple trumpet buddies, since they play trumpet, can play it or something like that. So scale it down a little bit. Because again, that was my mistake, was trying to do too much at once, and it's a little bit discouraging, but also then there's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, like a beginner thinks they're completely an expert and doesn't realize that they don't know as much as they think they do. So, yeah.
Like small and consistent is better than huge and inconsistent.
I guess like kind of building on the like small and consistent idea, like since you are like their like, teacher in a class, would you suggest like assigning them homework kind of like from like the list of like
Yes.
things you're giving and like be like, okay, next week on like, Monday, write this over the weekend, bring it back on Monday, we'll look at it?
Yeah.
100%.
I think what would be even better is if you can play it for them. Like you play flute's your primary instrument. Let's say write 8 bars for flute. Again, keeping it small. Don't say write me a 12-minute sonata because that's not going to happen in a week. But like bring in 8. Everybody's got to bring in 8 bars, and just I'll play it because then that's especially helpful if you don't come from a composition background. Because if you're a good enough composer or arranger, you can look at something and go, oh, that's not playable. But also then they can hear it too. Because what's a really big treat for a composer, especially someone who's working in like muse score, is hearing an actual player and hearing the inflections. And as a composer, it's one of the best experiences to hear the music played live, even if it's just one person or a symphony orchestra. It's still going to sound pretty freaking cool because it's not coming out of that.
And also, the MIDI on like muse score or something is not as accurate. Like a
It's
trumpet,
stretched.
like near the top of their range they're gonna be like that. They have a flute, they're like in the lower of their range, but if their volume is mixed right, they can sound like together on MIDI. But in actuality, that's probably not gonna happen.
Yeah. Any other?
Alright, I guess it's more of a question for you guys. But like if you want to like arrange a song, do you immediately like start transcribing, or do you look for a lead sheet, or do you look for a score, or like where do you start usually?
So for me, I'm more comfortable doing it by ear because
Okay.
that's just how I work. I work by ear. I don't normally look at scores unless it's like chord changes or something like that. So my workflow is a bit different, but what do y'all do?
I think the first most important thing is to listen to the piece, listen to the piece a couple times, write down the form, and then after writing down the form, think about the form you want in the arrangement and the orchestration. So listening to it, and then after that I start transcribing or looking for sheets online. I go to MuseScore, I look up what I want to find, and I'll try to find a piano reduction, and I check it because it's a public, the public post it, so there might be some little wrong notes, but yeah, by ear and looking for scores after listening to it a couple times, it really helps me.
Yeah, if I can piggyback onto that, I definitely go with more of Nick's approach. Like listening to it, obviously, it's always better if you do something that you like and you've heard it like 1,000 times. So do that, and then again, for me, I rely on a lead sheet or like a piano reduction a lot more, just because my ear is not. It's gotten better, but it's not the greatest. But I can kind of piece together, and I think that I have a pretty decent instinct on what's going to sound like. Oh, this is something like this is a guitar part, but I'm orchestrating it for concert band. I think the way it's laid out, it's going to translate really well to this section or that section. But I really like to work from a reduction first, regardless. Even if it's a composition, I prefer to work small and then expand it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the most helpful.
And then if you have an idea, let's say you're taking out your song and you want to like reorchestrate it, right, for a different ensemble. If you have ideas in your mind, like, oh, for the C section, I'm gonna have the strings play the melody, or for like the B section, I'm gonna have it be a vocal. part instead of like, I don't know, a trumpet part like that. If you have those ideas, write them down first. So then you're like, oh, okay, when it's time for me to like, when you have the melody from the score, when you listen to it a lot, then you can be like, okay, what range will this work in? What key will this work in? You know what I mean?
Can I piggyback off that, JR?
Yeah.
So planning, I think JR kind of alluded to that. Planning is actually really helpful. This is more for a beginning or an intermediate than advanced composer. Once they kind of know how how to make a melody and whatnot, is planning it out. Because it's really easy to be like, oh, I have this cool idea because I heard this song in band and I really liked the harmony or whatever. And then you get 8 bars in and you're like, okay, cool, I'm done. Writing out even just an idea of the form or what ideas you want, like even just in written words, what kind of things you want to talk about, so to speak. I found that that's really helpful. Did you have anything to add on that? Oops.
This is pretty rare in this day and age, but what would you, if you were in our position as an educator, tell a kid who wants to compose who has no access to notation software?
Manuscript paper, manuscript paper is really helpful. There was a bit of time where I would start my ideas on manuscript paper instead of staring at a computer screen. It's a really different experience.
Are there techniques that are specific to using a pencil and paper that you would tell a kid? I mean, are there things that you have to look out for, things that are easier, things that are harder?
Yeah, it's definitely harder to write you have to write all the bars yourself and put the treble clef, what key you're in, and the different bar numbers. So it takes more time, and also you can make mistakes because notation software, they won't let you put more than 4 beats in a 4/4 bar.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're on paper, you could probably write 10 and you wouldn't notice. So I think them having their very beginning theory knowledge of what are notes, what's bass clef, what's treble clef, and how to read music, and also a bit of musicianship like dictation, which I'm not sure how much a high school student will do, but that stuff will help them write with manuscript paper.
Another thing that I can suggest, it's not like a writing thing per se, but record, they can tell them to go in voice memo, just sing it or play it on their instrument. If you have a collection of those right there, then you're oh, okay, you can piece it together and have a format of, okay, A section, B section, melody, harmony, etc.
And say, because I know at least for people in my high school, a lot of schools have access to Chromebooks or whatever, but you can't install Sibelius on a Chromebook.
Yeah, it's got 4 gigs of memory or whatever.
Yeah, it's gonna explode. I don't personally like it, but I think what I started on was Flat IO or NoteFlight.
Yeah.
Because it being cloud-based and online, I know it's gross. I don't like either of them, but it's better than nothing if that's all they're using and all they have access to is a Chromebook.
Yeah.
But again, I think there's value in doing it old school, so to speak. It's good practice.
Yeah.
Hurts your hand.
True. And also the thing is, a lot of people say that it's better when you're really writing stuff down rather than typing out your notes, writing it on paper than typing it out, because you'll remember it better. Same thing, I would assume goes for writing out everything too.
Any other questions?
Okay, I'll ask the last one, I guess. A year or two after I graduated high school, they started a composition class there. They hired a teacher with some donation money or whatever. What is your ideal composition class look like for a high schooler? What would have been most helpful for you when you were that age and you were starting to explore this stuff? And how do you think that could be implemented? Because I think it's going to be more and more of a thing in the years to come.
That's a great question.
I want to take it, you kind of touched on that earlier.
Yeah, I've seen some schools, I know Frost Middle School recently started a music magnet, and they're they have production lessons, and I'm not sure about composition, but yeah, I think how I would have that class run is definitely not more than 5 students probably. Which I know is not realistic for LAUSD schools, they'll throw 30 kids in the class,
But only so many are interested in serious composition.
yeah, that's why. Definitely don't have 5 kids there. That would be the ideal thing because you want to give them each a good amount of attention. I've taught theory to 20 kids, and it's really hard to teach all of them compared to a class of 5 kids. And also, I guess having a composer that understands that the kid is a blank slate pretty much, and not try to, I guess, influence them too much. Kind of have them influenced by their own things they like what type of music they like.
And just something to add on to your question right there. At least for me in high school, having like live feedback is probably one of the best things I would wish I had. And I was doing everything in like notation software, and while it is great, it's not the best to have like a live representation of what it'll sound like. So if the teacher could find like a little small group, or if they can like play it themselves, that'll be even better. Like touching upon what Zach said, I'm like, if you're a flute player, right? Okay, write like 8 bars for flute. So they get like live feedback. That's probably like one of the things I wish I had.
And then maybe teaching them some basic composition techniques, like how to write a melody, how to write chord progressions, all that stuff. Like some theory stuff would help them a lot.
Yeah, the background in theory, it's not necessary. But I mean, it's like knowing like principles in art, like perspective or proportion. Like, yeah, you could just wing it and it's probably gonna look okay, but it's gonna add some refinement, I think.
Definitely.
Great.
That's it, last call.
Alright.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. Can we have another hand for If you came in late, our check-in link is on the board, and please note, next week, we're not meeting at our usual time. We'll be meeting at 4:30 on Tuesday, because we're having a collaborative clinic with another NAfME chapter at CSU Fullerton. There will be an email sent out about it tomorrow. But yeah, again, just note, next week we are meeting on Tuesday at 4:30.
Never know what I just do that.